welcome in. I'm gonna give you guys a little tour of what I've got set up here because I feel like you can't quite see it. I have a little jar of chamomile here. That is for calming. I have some amethyst here in a jar. This is gifted to me. You can see there's like little bits of other darker stuff in there too. But yeah, a really wonderful person that I was at a market and they were also at that market. Gave away a lot of things. They were like, literally take everything, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna take everything, but I'm really interested in the things, because some people give things away. Like, that's, I have an affirmation that I say that like whenever I need something, someone else is ready to release that thing that I am needing right at the exact right time. Like as soon as I am like prepared and ready, like right now I'm saving up for a car, and so like once I hit that mark, once I have my money, my car will be ready. It will be there, and I will be able to find like whatever that is. And I've had so many different people's like advice, like go for a Honda, go for a Toyota Corolla, from this, and I'm like, I kind of want like a 1990s Jeep. So I'm thinking that that will hopefully be what comes through in the end, because I would really like to have like a particular thing. It was like literally for what is that called, like a where kids go missing, an Amber Alert. There was an Amber Alert whenever I was young, and the description of the car that we had to go around and look for, like my grandma was like, hey, we're gonna go around and look for this car to see if it's parked at any of these like apartment complexes or in these neighborhoods. Like, let's just go look around. And that description of that car always stuck with me, so I want that car. Which is kind of an interesting story, but that is growing up in the 90s in America. I feel like I'm such a 90s kid. Regardless of when I was born or whatever, like that is the only when I actually, you know, have been like fully present and aware of where because I was still barely in the 90s. So anyways, I am here to read some tarot, and I have some nature sounds going in the background. I have some more rocks to show you. For this is probably just an amethyst as well. Interestingly enough, these are amethysts, and this is amethyst. Amethyst has range. I have a lot of rocks, a lot of stones too. This is celestite, which is likely from a geode, but I'm not sure. Could be mined. I don't know. And let's not even get into the question of ethical mining, except for to say that I bought this and then was questioned about the ethical mining practices about it, and that was how I learned. I wish that I would have, you know, thought about that ahead of time, but I was still very much not committed to even like my own set of values at that time. Like I did not have my own value system at that time. I was living off of an imported value system that came to me from the people that I had grown up around, and I hadn't really like called myself on that fact fully, which is why I'm dedicated like in this channel to doing that, is to helping people find their own value system. Because if you don't decide what your value system is, the world will decide it for you. And this society, this fucked up society that has, you know, ICE acting like slave patrol, that has the most horrific things happening inside of the most horrific places that can exist, prisons, and just like this magnitude of necropolitics will decide what your values are for you, and you will perpetuate then the necropolitical values of this necropolitical system. Which, if you don't know what that means, I would definitely take some time to look into necropolitics. There's a really great book that's really easy to listen to, in my opinion, And if you can't listen to the full book, listen to somebody talk about the book first and then see. But like, you know, it's something that we discuss in my Divorcing White Supremacy group that is on pause right now, but we're going to start back up probably sooner than planned. Was like, I need to take some time off, but as I've been able to step back from some other things, I've been able to see like I don't need as much time off, so I'll be coming back into that soon. And so you can look on my Instagram page if you're wanting to join on that. The original form, probably closed. If not, you can fill it out and also reach out to you. But I'm working on a new form for it. And we talk about things like this. Like we talk about like how it's a constant work, a constant, and so you have to keep this growth mindset that like it's not about that I'm not good enough. It is about that I have so much unlearning to do. I have so much, like I was wrapped up, like, you know, you weave a basket or something, right? And like a person is woven through and throughout, you know. We as children have this physical body and this emotional, you know, being and this psychological protection that we need. And if we don't get that, then that affects, you know, any unmet need affects our emotional body. And so we have then, you know, our emotional needs, our spiritual needs, our physical needs, and we have all of these things. And so like through each of those is like a thread. Then if one of those threads is dysfunctional, is fake, is pretending to be something that it's not, is saying that it's caring and loving, but is actually cruel and callous and neglectful or something, you know, or abusive or whatever it is, or all of the above, then, you know, I don't know how much you all know about weaving, but you have a warp and a weft, and if one of those is off, it's visible. And it's uncomfortable to look at. People will tell you that would make a great coaster or a great seat thing or something, you know, but it's not something that people are going to want to put up on a wall, you know, and people do that. People do that with macrame. People do that with their weavings. People do that with stuff. Rugs, beautiful rugs on the floor that we walk on all the time, but it is because it creates some beautiful thing in our space, and to want to feel so uncomfortable when we look at something like that is because of the discord. We can feel it. That the structure of it is not, it's lost integrity somewhere. And it's the same thing that happens with us, that we lose integrity and we do things that once we develop our value system, we look back and we think, wow, I'm ashamed of having done that. I am not guilt-ridden, but I think I can say that I'm ashamed that I did that, and that prohibits me from doing it again without feeling guilt. But it doesn't mean that I feel like, oh, I need to like lash myself every day, or I need to like verbally lash myself about it, and I don't feel activated when I talk about it, other than I feel like if I were to buy any kind of stone again, I constantly think of the provenance. And I think about, if it's absent, why would that be? And who's selling it? And then what context does that give me? And can I go without it? Is it something that I really feel like I am going to feel will add a lot of value to my life, to lives of other people that I work with, you know, like, and what is the cost of it? And what am I doing? You know, so like going from getting this rock to getting this, was a really cool like transition to see how, like, even getting this, I'm curious about the provenance of it. Just because it was gifted to me doesn't mean that it's okay to ignore that. It's just that like each one of these things has sent me through different things. I got a lot of my rocks from a local geological society where they do track where the rocks came from, and I really love that. So I've looked into that geological society at other times too. And I'm going to try to go to some of their shows that they go to, that they do big shows and sales of rocks. And they talk about the mining process, you know, because there's like certain agreements, like you can go to Arkansas and you can yourself, you and your kids, you know, can go and dig up quartz, but you can't sell that quartz, like you're not supposed to. And you enter an agreement with that facility whenever you go and you take that quartz that you aren't going to sell it, and if you did, it would be a problem. And it's just one of those things that is a way of, you know, sometimes it's about respect to the land, sometimes it's about respect to corporations and companies and profits and pockets. So I think it's, you know, interesting. And we're in a time now where it's like really difficult for people who are native and indigenous and who are being respectful to be able to sell even things that they, you know, the bones that they clean and the things that they, yeah, the jewelry and stuff that they make with real bone and things like that, because of people's sensibilities being offended. And I think that this is what emotional illiteracy gets us sometimes too, like for white people, is that we don't recognize what is our sensibilities being offended, our ideology being challenged, and what is an actual threat to us. We really don't have those things all parsed out, and it's a disservice to society to be filtering everything through the self. If I can do it, why can't other people do it? Which I hear so much, which is like, you know, lauded right now. I feel like this is a big point. It's like, why don't we just... Oh, there's a fox. A fox just showed up, sorry. But why don't we just give people tough love, give them more pressure, bear down on them harder. And the reality is that not everybody has the same reaction to pressure. Not everyone will respond in the same way to pressure in the same places. Not everyone has the same pain points, so not everybody perceives that pressure in the same way. And the reality is that if I have a thorn in my side and you walk past me and you shove it in harder, I might fucking elbow you in the face. And that's a reasonable response. And so we can say, ouch, that hurt my face, and still recognize that we would have probably reacted the same if we could put ourselves in this person's shoes, which is really hard to do, because again, we don't see it as a thorn in their side. We see it as a pinprick. We see it as, you know, we see it as these little things, and we justify and excuse it, or we know full and well that it causes pain and suffering, and because we're not feeling it, we just don't care. Let's long talk about that rock and whiteness. These are rose petals. We grow roses. They haven't bloomed yet, which they probably won't until later in the summer. Like, it gets real hot, so it has something to do, they're in the shade, so it has something to do with that and some other things. But I've tried to do this like 5 times, and 3 or 4 of them turned out moldy. This is 2 sets of rose petals in there, and I love them. They smell beautiful when I open it, but I try not to open it much because they're doing really wonderful, and I don't want them to get moldy. And I have I have 2 butterflies that also did well and didn't mold, but the ones that I open again, and I'm not vacuum sealing them or anything, like I'm just like a little kid putting them in a jar and sealing it up. But those ones, yeah, have fared the best, are the ones that I just have sealed up and don't mess with anymore. I think I dried these out on like a little plate first, but I can't say for sure that I did. So who's ready to read some cards? Oh, I also have a really cool knife here. This is my protection element because I didn't use a black candle. I used a red candle, but I didn't use a black candle today, so I keep a protection element with me. And then I have my 9-sided D9. That's what they're called. 9-sided dice. That's what I'm gonna say because I'm out of the loop. I feel like it's funny because like I don't know, nerdy people seem so cool to me, and I'm like, I don't know all the lingo yet. It's funny, that's how people feel like whenever Gen Zers start talking a lot of times. Okay, I'm gonna have to keep tapping this screen because I don't like not seeing what is being shown. Okay. This fox is so beautiful. It's all red and orange. Not even muddy. Last time the foxes came on, they were all muddy. We're not doing a pick a card today, but you will have an option in the middle of this reading where you'll get to pick a path, essentially. And so we'll kind of go down a couple different pathways. And thank you for joining me. If you want to subscribe, if you want to follow me on social media, it's all Tulsa Alien, and Tulsa Alien 2. I try to collaborate on most things. You can support me through Ko-fi, coffee, and this fox is munching so hard on like some little, you can hear him, like little acorns or something. Bugs, now they got some bugs. They're like, it's like, we're just getting cards now to see what the story is and how the, general highlights of the story, what they are, and we're going to connect those points. So we got something turned over now, so we're not supposed to see that one yet. I love when that happens. First three came out face up. Any more? I'll wait till my fingers get tired. Just needing a pop. There we go. So this begins with the Eight of Wands in reverse. And I'm going to focus a bit more on a system that I've created where what I call tarot and oracles for social emotional growth. And my thumbnail might say something a little different. It's based off of the idea of social emotional learning, which is something that educators are often taught about. And so it's something that I studied as someone who was primarily an artist who wanted to also educate and did not have an education program to go into. And I was already through my bachelor's degree. And so I was like, well, I'm not sure. What do I do? And is it worth it, to keep going to school? Like, I'm already this much in debt. Do I keep going to school to become a teacher, or do I just learn what education like fundamentals are. And so like that was kind of what I focused on, and I ended up going more towards non-traditional education because I'm neurodivergent and my needs are better met outside of that setting. Like that setting does present a lot of like obstacles and challenges for me that are really hard to manage overcoming. And so like I did not do well in school because of like overhead lighting and the seating and things like that. Like I dealt with medical like issues and stuff because of those things, and the requirements and the settings and stuff of it. So like going back into it as an adult just was not a viable option to me. So leaving that meant that going this other way meant that I had to really like study all of these things that a lot of teachers inherently get taught in their training, that they kind of possibly don't, they take for granted, they possibly don't like think about as much, or some of them do, and then they're really awesome teachers. So I took this system that is called social emotional learning that talks about how we learn through socialization to accomplish these. And it's obviously very goal oriented. It's very much about like, hey, you need to be able to like, what are some of the ways it talks about it? It's like healthy decision making, like, things like that are kind of an interesting, like, who is to decide? And obviously that can be abused. Like if you set up like, oh, it's not healthy to eat fast food, well, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, are you going to guilt trip a mom who takes her kid to McDonald's because otherwise that kid doesn't get to eat breakfast? That's not really fair. And it's not taking into consideration that, yes, it's not a healthy decision, but are they empowered to make a healthy decision? Is that healthy decision even fucking accessible to them? And things like that. And so that's what I try to take into account as I'm going to, use this system, is to not perpetuate that harm, but to also take into account that through socialization, like at school, like in our neighborhoods, and in our families and our communities, wherever we connect with people, we have the opportunity to continue growing and learning about how to socialize, and how that socialization is about us, so like the self socializing with the outside world and with the internal world. There's a lot of focus on socialization as this thing that the self does with the external world, and I think it's also just as important to focus on how that self also relates to the internal world, and that we do have, and I think of it like our sleeping world. It's like, my mic's over here if you can't tell, but like a sleeping world is like how we are, it's a whole nother side of us. We don't know what goes on. We have dreams and we get glimpses into what we think is happening, but perhaps that dream is a distraction. It's a thing that we're taught to think that this is what's happening while you're sleeping, but in reality you're going into a whole nother place and a whole nother dimension and a whole nother reality and living a whole life. People tell you that you show up in other people's dreams and things like that, so it's like, who knows what's happening. But we have, in that same vein, I think we also have an internal world that is all of the things and all of the people and all of the versions of ourselves that we've been before, or that we may be in the future, cooking, simmering, sitting there, doing what, and we get to interact with that part, with who we've been in the past and with who we want to be, and where we want to end up for our life, or what we want to be doing in our career, whatever that is, whatever that, people call this your higher self. I choose not to go with that particular vein of talk because I'm pretty sure that was like a George Washington, like, I'm pretty sure that was something that he personally believed in. So I'm not sure that that's true 100%. But I just personally, I don't identify with that particular language of like the higher self, because I don't know why, but it just doesn't ring true to me. So the system says that wands focus for us on what we do when we get bored and destructive. if you've ever been, and this is obviously, like, you can tell this is based around a lot of child psychology. So, like, but that translates into adulthood. I don't want to prescribe or ascribe anyone as being destructive. Like, I'm not going to sit here and give examples, like, thoroughly about other people's experiences. But I know that for me, when I get imposter syndrome, whenever I give into my imposter syndrome and I believe that because I'm not resourced, or because I haven't done it before, or because I don't have the full vision in mind yet, that I'm not going to be able to create the thing, like whether that's co-creating a conflict resolution with somebody, or that's creating a project, like a thing that I've envisioned and I want to put out in the world, a sticker, a fucking t-shirt, a screen print, a postcard, a poster, whatever, a drawing, whatever it is, a painting, pardon me. But whatever that is that I want to put out there, like, when I get to a point where I am giving in to this insecurity that I am not enough to be doing what I'm doing, which is, usually it's my head and my heart both saying, like, oh, like, it's putting up resistance and saying, something about this isn't fun, something about this isn't what I should be doing. And so it's like that tension can be a time where I can become more destructive. Like, I can. So for me, that looked like substance abuse. Like, obviously, like, I sometimes use substances to, like, regulate myself and manage my pain. I'm still, actively doing that sometimes. But it was also a time whenever, like, alcohol, specifically alcohol, became really easy to abuse, to, like, escape the crushing weight of imposter syndrome. And so, like, and then I felt like it gave me confidence, like, it greased the wheels and stuff, like, when you go out into social situations. But I also didn't get to show the side of myself that I wanted to show. Like, I didn't get to tell people about, the wonderful things that I think about. Oh, shit. But it distracted me. So anyways, like, that's the spectrum we're working on here, is that, like, what do we do? Because it was a form of boredom, that I was like, I want something more exciting than being good at what I'm doing, or going through this hard step of maybe not being great at it, and practicing and failing and continuing to go and refine. As a person with ADHD, I get bored in those systems, and so, like, that was a time to me that, like, imposter syndrome would creep up, because it was like, well, if you're not really that dedicated, if you think this isn't something you should be doing, and you're sitting here doing it and you're pushing through, you're being inauthentic, when in reality, that's the creative person's, like, quandary, is, like, when you're building that muscle and you've come from a place that has said that creativity is unimportant, and you've literally told your parents that you're majoring in art, and they tell you, what are you going to do with that? And you just, like, you take that to heart, and you realize that you're the only person that really believes in you, and that your professors expect a lot from you as a result of that. That's a really hard place to be in, and it's really unfair, the level of pressure that I put on myself in that situation. So I just wanted to share that, like, that to me was, like, kind of what this was about, was I wanted what I was doing to be pleasant in a way that wasn't gonna happen at that particular time and space for me. And now I'm, like, okay with that. Which has led me to the question of, like, do I go back to school? Do I study art more? Do I find independent little things that I want to go to and learn from? And I've learned how much I don't particularly love particular parts of the formal art scene. So like the museums and the gallery spaces, and the way that capital decides what values get elevated and perpetuated. And so here we are. That boredom was with, trying to fit myself into somebody else's value system again. I think is the other key part of that, was that like, and when I tried to fit myself into a value system, into an art world that had a value system that I did not agree with, once again, I felt like I was just like, I have no choice but to try in this university in order to succeed, or to be, to get the most even from what I'm doing here. Like, I feel like I have to do this particular thing. And I didn't. I just decided that I wasn't going to do it that way. And that I'm going to do it the way that I know benefits me. And I'm glad that I did. I still gained a lot from going to school there, and I could have gotten more also. Wands represent that spectrum of getting bored from our main goal possibly being approval seeking. I know that was me at that time. Like, I was very much like, if somebody isn't going to be at least disapproving, when you're in art school and you're not getting feedback on your work, is the worst time sometimes. And sometimes that happens just because time, but that the people are getting feedback are getting it because they show a lot of promise. They show a lot of like, that they're able to do what is being asked. And for me, it was a practice in, how do I not take this to be even the good things? How do I not take this personally? When I would do life drawing, when I would do certain things, I would get praise in a way that was like, cool. Like, I know that if I continued this way, I could do something really cool and amazing. And also, people want to see me turn my sketches into something else, and I don't like that, because I really love drawing, and I would really love to be able to sell finished drawings. And I had people that have been interested in that. Like, I've had spaces like businesses and stuff have interest in that, and I pulled back and was just like, I'm not trying to do this, because the preparation and all that I would have had to do just was too much. And it wasn't that much, but it was just like in the middle of school, it was too much for me. So it's just one of those things that and it's a normal human thing to seek approval from others. And it's important that we recognize it and how it can impact our drive. I think that is the growth point, is, one of the main growth points of this place right here that we're talking about, this vein of boredom and destruction because of approval seeking, is happening. And for most people, not everyone, but for most people, this is happening, and it's normal. We just need to recognize that. When are we transferring that also to other situations? Like, when are we seeking the approval or validation? What is approval seeking? Seeking validation, or seeking people to tell us, like I said, like, even having people disapprove would be better than not having any approval, or not having any feedback at all, because you feel like at least you're part of the system. And how do we manage with that? My notes here say a collaborative and creative mindset are what we have to cultivate. And that was definitely, like, again, I was in art school, so that became obvious to me, is how do I still work with my fellow students even when my teachers are not necessarily being very, like, helpful. And for a long time, like, it was really hard for me to understand, like, how to connect to people, but it was because I was in a situation financially that was so different than other people. and I didn't have the language to articulate it, because like it costs disabled people like several $1,000s more a year to survive. And that is shown up in not just medical costs, but also in like other little things like late fees, like gas money, like, you know, just things that happen more often because you're disabled, like food costs, you know, just you're having to go to that special grocery store to get that special thing because it's the only thing that doesn't make your stomach hurt or whatever, or the only thing that, you know, works for your dietary needs or whatever it is. And like I really just had no language for talking about that, and so like that was why I ended up like now creating Planet Weird. So it's that idea of like, how can we take this issue that we have and find other people. Like I had an unmet need in college, which was to be able to commune with my colleagues, my peers in school, and to be able to maybe even make fucking friendships with them. And you know why I couldn't do that was because I had so many other chronically unmet needs, that desperation, that panic was always there, palpable, you know, it was always detectable on me. And I did a lot of escapism because I was like, nobody else is going through this. And when I talked about what I was going through, nobody wanted me to talk about it, you know, like everyone was just like, okay, you know. It's just an interesting experience going to school and being like, oh, we're gonna make our art about these really deep topics, but we are not going to talk about deep things. So what if we shifted from approval seeking to wanting to develop what I have written here is healthy decision making. Healthy decision making with moral courage, compassion, and integrity. So we talked about that, like lack of integrity being like this fundamental thing, because we justify it. I've justified a lack of integrity of saying I'm brave enough to stand, you know, have this particular opinion in this particular audience or in this particular crowd. But if you take me into this crowd, I am going to pretend like I don't feel that way because I'm afraid of what will happen. I'm afraid of the pushback. I'm afraid of the backlash. I'm afraid of violence. And those are human things to be afraid of that stuff. But also, like, moral courage is being willing to say that, like, this is what I believe is moral and just and right, and I'm not gonna back down just because I'm in an unpleasant setting for giving that opinion. So this Eight of Wands to me is very much about like you know, and a reversal. It's a blockage of that moral courage and integrity and compassion. So how are we justifying not having those things, and how are you doing with that? Because I know that I have noticed in myself like a numbness and a callousness, and I am repeating to myself, you know, one thing I am not going to be is numb. One thing I'm not going to be is numb. And that's become something that I try to remind myself of, is that like, and that on the other flip side is also tapping into my bodily sensations, which is a really difficult task for somebody who has very little like proprioception, or I think that's what's called, this sense of being able to sense that part. So for me, it's very much about like when do I feel judgmental, and how can I move from that place of feeling like I need to judge somebody or something really harshly to trying to be grateful for what, just something, one or two things, like in the recent past. Something they've done for me, something that they are, something that they just don't do that somebody else did. that really bothers me, that, you know, because like we don't think about that, but like the absence of some behavior can be, you know, really good and comforting and safe, you know, like this person does not ever talk badly about me. That's a good thing to think about, you know. So the Eight of Wands also represents, let's talk about it, but perseverance, courage, resolve, composure, self-compassion, patience, acceptance, and forgiveness. That's 8. The number 8 represents those things. So like again, reiterates the same message that there is a blockage here on something. We're justifying, rationalizing, continuing to let space grow between us and compassion, between us and moral courage, between us and integrity. And we may then be relying on this, you know, kind of primal base desire to be approved of, to be validated, to just simply not receive pushback. When pushback, conflict, those things, just as much as they can escalate a situation to violence, they can also deepen a relationship. And it's important to remember that, you know, speaking of destruction, conflict is not only a destructive force. Conflict is also a generative force. It is also a portal, is what I like to call it. It's a portal to something else, like because on the other side of our complaints is a request for what it is that we do want, and that matters, you know. Now obviously, like there are things that can't be, you know, considered conflict. Even like there's conflict between people who are in relationship with each other, falling out of right relationship with each other, maybe trying to restore that, repair that, and there are a lot of factors in that. Like, do all the parties involved want to repair? Is repair possible? Was bigotry involved? You know, was violence involved? But bigotry being a form of violence. You know, all of these things. So this reading here is telling us to think about, you know, from the Eight of Wands being reversed, that is a loss of these things, because here they're all flying towards you. Action oriented. Let's go read what the Eight of Swords is about real quick before we move on to that. Eight of Swords, Eight of Wands, I said. Swords and then Wands. Speed, action, swift change, movement, travel, especially air travel. So this is a resistance to those things. Here we go. A resistance to speed, a resistance to action, a resistance to movement, a resistance to swift change. And it's okay if you need to, like, wait a minute, this change is happening too fast, and you need to, like, sit down and cope or deal or ask it to slow down. I understand. As a neurodivergent person, like, that is definitely something that, like, the speed at which things happen can be really, like, complex. But this being about, you know, that maybe this thing that you've depended on for approval is no longer happening at the speed at which you expect it to happen. You used to get a lot of validation from your partner, and that slowed down. You used to feel like, and that validation could be through anything. That validation could be through them, like, you know, being particularly affectionate in this particular way, and that, like, they no longer do that. You know, it could be, you know, the smallest thing changing. Like, it doesn't have to be that you openly are like, hanging on their every word, but that you depend on some outside thing to tell you that it's acceptable to act or ask for, or to have integrity, to have moral courage, to say the thing that needs to be said, to do the thing that needs to be done. And that's what a good communicator does. They say what needs to be said and they do what needs to be done. But that's what integrity is, that's yeah. I think that's important to think about, like, or ask what needs to be asked. We always say it needs to be said and we don't think about it, but like question what needs to be questioned, that kind of thing too. So this resistance to that movement this is what we're also resisting, is happiness, is contentment, is joy, is enjoyment. We can't numb ourselves to pain without also numbing ourselves to joy. We can even try to numb ourselves to pain through inaction, but still stay moving. Through comedy, but still never fully addressing that pain and never fully realizing joy. Because we're never fully realizing what it is that we want or that we desire, because we're focused more on what we want to want, what we're told to want, what we're asked, don't you want that? Which is another form of validation seeking, like, it's a very common thing, like, as a genderqueer person, as a queer person, you go through a phase in your life where you have to kind of talk to yourself and think about, like, have I been true to myself and about, like, what my gender presentation or my sexuality, like, am I being true to what those things are? How much am I being influenced by the world around me? And am I internalizing heteronormativity? Like, am I, because that's what's presented to us. Like, we're presented with ideas and media and socializing and all these things, and people asking us all the time, when are you gonna have kids, when are you gonna get married, and the implication being that it will be a heteronormative heterosexual relationship, and that you will follow this relationship escalator where you don't get married until you don't have sex until you get married, or you don't live together until you get married, and you follow this. And, like, obviously, like, there's some variation on that, like people falling maybe slightly off of that, but still saying, like, you should still have kids with people, or that you have a deeper bond with people whom you do have kids with versus the people whom you live with, that you raise your kids with, versus, I don't know, like, it's just, there's a whole multitude of things that can come up there. And so, like, thinking about what is it that we're, like, what are we getting from what's going on, and how much have we I think it's okay to be tired, but it's like, how much joy are we accessing? That's a hard thing to measure, but I think it's something to reflect on, is like to ask ourselves, like, several times, like, is there a pattern developing anywhere about how we're not experiencing joy in some part, and is it something that we can change, or is it about somebody and that it would be unfair to ask them to change? And the next card is the Wheel of Fortune, so that's about that change being constant. And that like, it's very normal to be asking ourselves that reflection question, but reflection is often underrated, undervalued. And so, especially in this system, like, forethought and reflection are often I don't know, they seem emphasized but not valued to me. That's what I would say, is that like there's like people will say like, oh, you don't have those things, like you were impulsive, like you didn't think, like you didn't know. And it's like, no, you had people telling you from a young age how to handle all that stuff. Like you were involved in a way that was empowering to you rather than it being overwhelming and daunting. You know, like I've heard from people that like they helped their parents manage finances and it was about them learning, you know, help them manage things, and like they just like felt like it was them being a part of their family. And like there are people that like felt like they were responsible and had to watch out for their parents like financial well-being and things like that. Like that's really stressful to put on a kid. So it's like not everyone is experiencing it the same way, but the changes are all happening. And our resistance to movement, our resistance to the changes that are happening will only add more work to our table. But it's a sign. It's a sign that you have resistance somewhere. I was just reading in my little magic book about resistance, you know, and it was somebody else's system. So I'll have to find that book and bring it back. But that we can be in dialogue with our resistance. You can write letters to your resistance, to yourself, to the part of you that you think is resisting, to the part of you that doesn't want to resist. You can have conversation with that and to get things moving. And I think that's what the choice is here, is that either you do that or you continue to be bored in this cycle of looking for approval. Like start looking for something else. Start looking for and doing something else, like, and stop resisting action because that's what is holding things back. Like there is this, like, this is relatable to me, like just waiting for people's permission to like do something, wanting to like run it by them, like all that stuff. Like it just, there's a point when that's necessary, and there's a point when it becomes superfluous, unnecessary, extra, way too much, not necessary to be putting that much effort and that much weight and trouble on things. So yeah, I think that's fairly normal. This is we still have 3 cards left. You can see here 3 cards turned over. I'm gonna go grab that book, come back, take a restroom break, and I will see you all in just a few minutes. Welcome back. We are back. I'm gonna take a drink of water again. So we've talked about our resistance to action, to change, from particularly an approval seeking being a very central goal or objective for us. So moving from that is also, or not moving from that is also, sorry, is also impacting our ability to experience joy and to embrace change on a broader scale. It's impacting our ability to maybe even, it's probably impacting our mood, this Wheel of Fortune. I think, oh, I forgot that book. Dang it. Okay, well, I'll have to maybe write it in the comments below. But writing, so the Wheel of Fortune, talking about like how maybe like the way that we even see like the world and ourselves is impacted by this approval seeking. So like if things aren't going our way and we're not getting the approval or even the disapproval that we want, then perhaps we're seeing that like it's us against the world, that kind of vision can go into, or it's us versus them, which is easy to get into again. And not thinking about how like being human factors into it. So like reducing people down to something that isn't quite fully human. Or maybe seeing ourselves as we're on top of the world because everything is going our way, we've got all the approval we need, and then when it stops, we finally feel something, really unpleasant that just is overwhelming. So like we maybe feel like we're kind of switching, and I'm not talking about manic depression or bipolar or anything like that. Like this is talking about us recognizing a worldview switch, not a mood, not like anything like, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen with that, but this is not speaking to a mental health crisis. This is speaking to just simply like a shift in beliefs or values. It's happening because like maybe a shifting sense of self. Like that's something I've experienced before, so that could be what I'm speaking to without realizing it, but like this is also just about like a paradigm shift that can happen, that as we recognize that approval is fleeting, or doesn't always translate to the the goal, the wealth, the stability, the security that we think it will. Like, so like seeing that like can shift, it can be a paradigm shift for us, to recognize that. And we're like, ooh, this is like really intense. And so like sometimes it's even like juicy, like good, not a pleasant experience, but it feels like we've gotten something from it. So like it's a conquest. And I think that is, again, it's a white supremacy concept, is that we want to like conquer and win and overcome. And so like we can get addicted to the conquest of these paradigm shifts that happen, really because we're being hard on ourselves, and we're numbing ourselves out, or blocking ourselves from numbing ourselves out from joy, and pain, but also avoiding action and change. So the next card that we got was the King of Pentacles. King of Pentacles here. King of Pentacles is a card that says like, let's see what my first impression is. Pentacles are about coin, but about like the resources that you need to survive. Like the coins in tarot represent that. The pentacle, it's like the physical coin, and the pentacle on it represents like the things that you need to protect and sustain your life, which is not just, food, shelter, water. It is like the family, the house, the home, the way that you are able to make all of that work. So it's all of those things. And so this is a king of that. This is somebody who has accomplished and maintains that well, essentially, is the assumption, especially with this guy. He's not smug. He's just assured and confident, rightfully so, hopefully, that he has taken care of things for what he's supposed to be, what is considered his to reign over, but to co-create with, to be, and king in this sense is less about hierarchy, position. It's more about a role, and it's less about rule, more about a role. So it would be about like, how do we then, somebody said this amazing thing. I was listening to one of Dean Spade's podcasts, Love in a Fucked Up World. He does a podcast, and I was listening to one of the episodes about incarcerated people, and one of the incarcerated people that was on the show, which I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly who it was, and I'll try to find that too and share it, but said, what was it, that I have to think about this for a second. Mutuality doesn't require equality. It requires transparency about power. So, and that means for us too, like whenever we have a particular kind of power, we need to be transparent with ourselves and to recognize. And sometimes that means for white people is like learning, the same way that a little kid would, is telling yourself that every day, that to remember that the white is not the default, that we are not without race, but we are not racialized because we have done the racializing. And I think that's an important like thing to recognize. Is so like a king who's not reigning over people, who's not wielding power over people, who is there to work with and to support and to be in this position because it gives them more responsibility, not because it gives them more glory, is someone who's willing to recognize that on a continual basis, as often as you might forget it, they're willing to recognize that you I don't know. The best analogy I have is a garden. You know, we grow up and we are embedded with these seeds that tell us that that wielding power over people is normal, that we don't owe anybody anything has become a big one. You know, just all of these like things that can happen, and we have to plant other seeds and we have to dig out those weeds. It's like a two-part process. So in order, and that, you know, I say this a lot in a lot of my relationships, I have to, you know, get to a point where we say like, it is one of my fundamental beliefs in life that I am duty bound to create transformation everywhere that I go by perpetuating my beliefs to the extent that they better the world around me. So it's like you know, for me that means like one of the big ones is that like I think that I believe that we as a society will not transform, will not see racial justice, social justice, disability justice, queer justice. We're not going to see immigrant justice. Like, we're not going to see those things fully realized until we see collective liberation. And we're not going to get there until we take on the social challenge as well as the political challenge to create social systems that disrupt the systemic bigotry also in our social systems, because everything that happens in the institutions is also happening in our social lives. Like, look at high schools, look at middle schools, look at, you know, elementary schools, look at it, and it happens from teachers to kids, it happens between students and themselves. And these are things that we have to recognize, is that society is mirroring other parts of society. And so the only way that we're going to like break free from that a little bit is by saying like, how does like the political system of patriarchy that puts more men into more positions of power, how does that also replicate in our social situations? Like, how is patriarchy, and again, social being both a relationship to the external world and a relationship to the self. So how does patriarchy show up in my relationship to myself? How does patriarchy show up in my relationships with other people? And how do we have social and group social, like interpersonal and group dynamics that allow for us to name these systems, patriarchy, capitalism, necropolitics, you know, these words, these big things, like, so like, you know, naming and disrupting them. And I don't see how we move out of a place where social patriarchy is prolific without having it also be as prolific to challenge social patriarchy and to allow that challenge to happen, because it's not a threat to anything except patriarchy. And if anyone takes on what you're saying when you're challenging patriarchy as a threat, then they themselves feel personally threatened by the dissolution of, you know, patriarchy or what the empire or what the fuck ever. Then it's not always a point of like, oh, well, fuck it, just throw everything down and you have to leave. in some cases, yeah, sure. But in some cases too, that's your family, or that's somebody that you need to be like, hey, look, are you really gonna go to bat for for them? Do you think that they would for you? Or just like, I had that conversation the other day with my dad, Bill Clinton, that I was just like, I do not give a good goddamn about Bill Clinton or the Clintons. Like, they just, everyone who has any relationship to the E word, I'm not even going to say his name, does not need to be in a position of power or have influence over anyone as much as can be helped. And that's what it should be. Like, and the way that has developed, to me, like, I grew up with Monica Lewinsky being a fucking joke on nighttime TV. I grew up knowing that was the best that I could expect as a poor person from Oklahoma. If I were ever to meet the president, that I should be glad to just be Monica Lewinsky. And that was just wild to me. And so, yeah. I think that those are important things we share, with the people whom activate that part of us and lead us down to have those conversations, and also, with the broader community, which is why I have the groups and stuff. And you can create your own group. Like, you don't have to be especially qualified to start a peer support group with white people where you talk about whiteness. And obviously that may take a lot of work. Like, you don't want to rely on white people to tell you what is whiteness. And there are like white supremacy or white, I can't remember what it's called. But the website, like, white supremacy cultural characteristics. I think it's white supremacy culture.info or something like that. But like, that is written by a white woman. So like, you have to take things into consideration. Like, you can use that information, but it's also not like your core place to get information. Like, you can also, there are other people who've written wonderful things too. And that, I don't know, it's very interesting what people will focus on, even when they're trying to disrupt things. Like, they don't always want to take it too deep, and it's honestly oftentimes because we just don't think about, like we've talked about, like, we just lack integrity. Like, we're just not we don't have the forethought, and then it comes after and it just keeps happening that way. And we have to look at our value system. Like, that was the lesson of when we talked about that rock, was because we were talking about how when our value system is a value system that we were woven with, that we didn't choose for ourselves, and we refuse to make a choice about what our value system actually is, and sit down and have a talk with ourselves about our values and our anti-values. I think both those things are important. I do not value this, and if I start to lean into valuing this, I want to reconcile with myself. I want to, call myself on it. I want to knock me on my ass. I want to hear, whatever it is that you need to have for yourself. I want to feel like a reckoning whenever that happens, like whatever it is that you need. Pardon me. To do that, I think is okay. All right. King of Pentacles represents. This is an enterprising, adept, reliable, supporting, steady person. So all of those things, and So who do you have around you that is this way, and how do you feel about that? Like, do you feel like you have to rely on them to be that way because it's something they have and you don't? And what if you couldn't possibly be around people like that unless if that was in some part of you? That you don't hang around strong people because you're weak, but because you're strong, you seek out strong people. That because you're witty and resilient and also soft and tender, that you seek out those things in other people, and that the people around you maybe are stubborn and dig their heels in because you're also those things. I think that's another side of that, is that my nose is really itching now. So Kings also reiterates the Eight of Wands that we were talking about, the approval seeking, so that, knowing that the King can be an approval seeking, goal oriented person, or they can also be someone who is avoidant and protective of themselves. So like they avoid other things and they think about themselves as like an island, I think there's like a Simon and Garfunkel song that talks about that, I'm an island. And in reality, that's not, not possible. And it doesn't work. So those being, two sides of the, I would say two sides of the, I don't know, I don't want to call it immature, but just like this unprincipled king. An unprincipled king is driven by, avoiding pain, increasing pleasure, avoiding pain, and conserving energy, a survival mode. And the growth that's being asked of us here then is, so the pentacles also remaining, so it's like getting stubborn like we talked about, and avoiding, protecting this, but anyway, sorry, the resolutions being collaborative, creative mindset again, and a growth mindset, which we talked about in the beginning, but recognizing that like successfully establishing healthy connections and turning those healthy connections, or at least some of them, into establishing and maintaining healthy relationships is kind of an important part. Like, and it's not because like it's not because we have to do something for other people necessarily, but it's because like those deeper relationships offer things that the relationships that are just healthy connections don't. Like, healthy connections can be your coworkers that you have, and they can do a lot for you, but in the reality, like when push comes to shove, like if you're in jail or if you're in the hospital, those coworkers might not be able or be willing to come to be by your side. They may come and drop off some flowers. They may get something delivered to you. They may do something kind, but they may not be right there for you. And you will still need that. You'll still need deep relationships with people who are willing, because they're concerned, to do that. And and obviously you don't need always people to come up and hang out at the hospital with you. I think some people really don't want that, I guess. And like I said that like in a judgmental way, and I'm sorry, but I don't relate to that. Like, I think that even if I didn't want to talk to people, I would still want people around, and I wouldn't mind there being tons of people in my room. Like, that just seems like a super normal situation, is to have more people around, because it's like less stressful. As long as those are people that I felt close to, like, but as a kid, like, there was always people around. Like, I was always having people around that were not necessarily safe. So it's just like, one of those things that like doesn't read as a big deal to me, to have like my loved ones, my close ones around. So this king is stretched across, trying to establish healthy connections, turn those healthy connections into establishing and maintaining healthy relationships, and then effectively making responsible and healthy decisions. So this is about learning about social boundaries, teamwork, power dynamics, and anti-oppression all together, as well as observing and practicing skills that are known and shown to support healthy relationships. So where can you find those things? How can you learn about that kind of stuff? And everybody's going to have a different place, like a different way that they learn. Autistic people will go onto YouTube and watch videos and learn things. Some people will just go out and hang out and play. Some people will think back into memories that they've had about other situations they've dealt with. Some people will watch their kids do things and they'll learn from them that way. Some people will watch TV shows and learn from them that way. Whatever you do is fine. Going to a therapist, going to a group therapy session that's geared towards this kind of thing. But yeah, just working on these different steps and observing and practicing skills to enhance responsible, healthy decision making, like we said, with moral courage, integrity, and compassion. So these are the tasks at hand for this King of Pentacles. That is what he represents here. And you can tell that I have ADHD. I'm like really struggling to see here. To edit this part out. Mm-hmm. So we're learning that our resistance to change and inaction, our numbing out, our avoidance is going to likely change a lot of our worldview and will make us possibly, we may still inherit this position, this role. We talked about it wasn't really about a position, but we may inherit the role of being the king over our territory and still not rise to the occasion to be able to do so in a way that's in line with our actual values. And I think that even if you don't dig into what your values are and recognize them, that there still will be cognitive dissonance if you're living outside of those values. That so like even if you haven't really articulated that you value being anti-racist, that if you are somebody who does not like racism, that you still will live in cognitive dissonance whenever you haven't really defined your value system as anti-racist, or that you haven't defined your anti-values as the characteristics of white supremacy. I think that I dealt with that quite often before, and I see it in people in my family who I have seen also not quite develop or define clearly what their value system is. I see that as well. So I hope to create a system to help people do that. And the thing is that system is extra weird. So like I don't know if people are really going to be into it, but I'm going to share it here and see who is interested and go from there, because it engages me and it doesn't, I don't know how to talk about it. It talks a lot about death. Like one of them is called Graveyard Goals. So this is it's about writing your own obituary. It's about talking about death and making that a normal thing. And so it's like so much in juxtaposition to what we do in America and Christian dominated society, evangelical Christian dominated society, that especially here in Oklahoma. So it's just like one of those things that like I feel that, for me, like that resistance to change, that resistance to action because of that. But it's not going to block me from it. Like it's just, it needs to be done. These things have helped me and I'm ready to share them with other people. And every time that I do share it with other people, I find that it's really impactful. And I think that's enough for me to say this needs to be shared. So when you get to this position, you want to be in a place that you can not wield power over people. that you can let people do things the way that they need to do things, and it not impede your ability to bring about, to take care, to be disciplined and secure. Like, it doesn't impact you because, like, they are where they are right now, and their devotion to this particular thing may be on the back burner to their devotion to staying alive and their survival needs, and do I have room? Do I have the capacity to move into valuing things beyond avoiding pain, increasing pleasure, and conserving energy? Do I get to be tired? Do I get to be do I get to practice not prolonging, without like withholding or something, but just like, can I challenge myself? Do I get to challenge myself now? Because there's been times in my life where I did not get to challenge myself because the world was challenging me enough. Like, there was no more room, and if anything else put pressure or challenged me, I would push it away. Like, I literally just did not have the capacity, and I would avoid and push away anything that tried to force me into having more capacity, because I felt like I was at my limit all the time, and I was. So the High Priestess reversed. That was what we got next. This is somebody with the knowledge, somebody with the knowledge at their fingertips all the time. That's fun. This is somebody who is like, so see, balanced. There's somebody who has like, essentially somebody who has like, we talked about there being like an internal world and an external world, and the High Priestess is representative of us having so much inside of us, having the answers, having the solutions to what this is hard. It's not to what troubles us, but it's to what is the reason we have unpleasant emotions about what we're going through, the suffering part. Because there are people who experience suffering and do not react to it in all the same way. So we know that there's a range of ability, and there is something that we have going on with us that we create emotions about experiencing things, like even bigotry, even discrimination, even systemic repression, state-sanctioned violence, those kinds of things. And it's not to say that that's good or bad, but just simply that, like, there, because literally, like, she's holding this crescent moon in between there. So, like, there is the earth and there is the sun, there is this moon in between, this satellite in between that holds something valuable, that sits up in the sky, that we look at it and we think, wow, that's beautiful, wow, that's interesting, wow, that's magnificent, wow, just like all of these things. There is something inside of us, and I love to say this is my favorite thing, is that there is something inside of us that looks at us and our life, our mundane, boring life, and thinks, wow, she's full right now. She is full of life. She's full. Oh, wow. She's waning. Oh, no. So this is, she's going down in size. She's going into hiding. She's having to take some rest, and, and we talk about the moon like she's a she, but that's what I was referring to, not, to anybody in particular, not myself necessarily in that context. But just that we look at the moon in this loving way, and we don't think of it as less because there is less of it visible to us. And it is that same way that a part of us is looking at us is that when we feel less than, that part of us sees us as hiding. That part of us sees us as darkening ourselves, turning the lights off, dampening other people's ability to see us. We aren't showing people our full self. In those moments, there's a part of us that looks at us when we are full of life and thinks, wow, they're showing every part. That's only half of them. That's only half of their strength. They're looking at us. They're looking at you and your mundane life where you're feeling the joy and the pain and the action and the speed and the exhaustion of it all. They're looking at you and thinking the brightness, that glowing thing that makes it look like it's almost like, dusk right now, but it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning at night. That thing lighting up the sky right now is only at half strength. Imagine what else there is that we can't even see. Imagine the beauty that exists beyond the limits of which we're capable of even perceiving. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's what this high priestess is representing, that we've blocked ourselves off from. So unfortunately, we need to really recognize that we don't have the resolutions to everything and everyone and all of these things. And this is my resolution, and you do not have to take it. But if you want to, you are welcome to adopt some part of it or all of it or whatever, or to let it inform your own new, perspective on this or whatever. But for me, I came here to love and be loved. I came here to feel it all, the pleasant and the unpleasant. I am here to experiencing being a human. That's it. And that is what it means to be a human to me, is to love and to be loved and to feel both the unpleasant and the pleasant, and to recognize, to feel it to me is to recognize in the midst of it that I owe it a gratitude, even when it's grief, pain, suffering, that I am alive to be able to feel it. And often it is still surrounded, bookended with bitching and complaining and trying to change things and all that stuff. But it changes the way in which I approach whatever it is that I'm going up against, because I'm here for the relationships. If I find myself in a position to be discarding relationships, then I'm not living in my values and I'm living somebody else's. And I've got to recognize that. And that doesn't mean that I let people push me over or run over all my boundaries. And I think that there is some middle ground there, and that's a hard thing to navigate, because and this is my opinion again, is that we get it wrong a lot of times about boundaries, about them being, these things, but they're meant to be bridges that connect us to other people. I am a node, you are a node, and the boundaries that I create are there to make connection possible. And so when a relationship changes and I talk about this a lot, is that, and I've talked about it in the past, is that I think of my boundaries as a house. When you go from being a kitchen, you're welcome in my kitchen friend, to a you're welcome on my front porch friend, to a you're welcome on my driveway friend, or to I'll see you at the park friend, or whatever it is, or I'll see you at your house friend. Those things make sense to me, those transitions and the feelings that come along with it. And so I can hold space for that. Other people will feel like this is weird, our relationship is changing, and I'll say, yeah, relationships change sometimes, and I'm okay with understanding that. We're gonna have really brief conversations possibly, or I'll see you around these times, and it's hard, to figure out how to deepen those relationships again. I think people want that depth again, but they need sometimes to know that, like, I'm not going to invite you into my kitchen when the way that you behave is not kitchen behavior, it's not in my house behavior, because you're not going to come into my house and treat me a particular way. And that's like a kind of an interesting concept to think about it as. But like, how do we set up different boundaries? Is that, like, I am okay with the people who are my front porch friends, that we recognize that small talk is the primary basis of communication. And I know that, like, a lot of neurodivergent people are like, oh, I don't like really small talk. I love small talk as a neurodivergent person, because and it helps me. Somebody articulated it this way, and I didn't think of it this way, but it is what I knew it as, is that it's how we communicate to each other that we're non-threatening, or that we want to be perceived as non-threatening. So it's to recognize that, like, I'm doing it to show you that I'm not threatening, and you're doing it or to show you that I want you to think I'm non-threatening. And I know that in the back of my head that I am still capable of being threatening. I am still capable of violence. I am still capable of harm. So, like, I am a danger. I am a threat. I'm a threat. But just that still being on my mind, but also that other person is also capable of it, and that this is what we're doing right now. So in customer service, like, I do it. It's never been an issue for me, because I recognize that, like, this is how we get through this moment, is by distancing ourselves from the discomfort of the fact that we don't know each other very well, and that, like, we could be a threat to one another. So but yeah, just like finding the way in which we can do small talk in socializing with ourselves and socializing with others, like that being okay in certain situations, and saying that, like, obviously, like, that's not gonna happen. Like, if you already had a big blow up with your mom or your aunt or your uncle or whoever, and they're asking you to come into situations where they're going to get into something other than small talk, or their small talk is political or something that they've already told you, like, that your small talk is unacceptable, you know what I mean? Like, those are different situations. But being in a customer service setting and having small talk with somebody who you're not even sure if you agree with them entirely on their, politics or whatever, isn't an impossible task to do. And it doesn't mean that you don't expect to use that relationship to challenge them in some way. And I think that's the thing that I've noticed in customer service, and in the customer service that I work in, which is a very particular industry, which I'm not going to get into, but that people do see being challenged in certain ways to certain degrees as normal in the course of relationships. And there are some people who see that same challenging not being conducive to relationships, because to them, relationships are deepened when people lose boundaries, or the laxity of boundaries increases, rather than you learn one another's boundaries and you recognize that as a friend you don't want to hit the thorn that is in the side of your friend. You would much rather be there to at least leave it alone, or at most, provide comfort and support if it's bumped up against by somebody else or by you. And knowing thorn first aid is important, or just knowing that, like, how to repair, because, like, it's gonna happen. Like, some people really value that stuff, and some people just value being able to move on to the next thing. And sometimes both those things are necessary. Sometimes people are just stuck on, like, only new relationship energy all the time, every time something goes wrong. And it's like, okay, that's a choice that you make, I guess. But, we have choices like that to make. And so that relationship that we have to ourself really dictates, can make or break our ability to have good relationships with other people, and to be able to resolve and to reach the goals, resolve what we need to resolve, and to reach the goals that we want to actually reach. So like, say you want to be, to run some nonprofit organization that does something amazing, but you've got a blockage because you really don't want to change. Like, you don't think you should be doing something, like you can't change that, perspective too, that like, oh, in order to like find the people that I need to work with, they need to already be prepared, but they have to have these particular values and this and that, but or I need to tell them exactly what to value. I need to like change these people into being these people, like it's gonna be like finding that the answers to how you deal with your feelings are inside of you, and you have to be willing to like not numb out. We talked about numbing out from the sun, from the joy and the pain, and so like we have to also recognize that numbing out also reaches us numbing out that like intuition, that voice, that inner voice that has guidance for us. So like there is sometimes that we just have to move, and we have to take some kind of action and find the people who, if we're needing more people to work with us on a project or whatever, not because we need to rule over people, but because we need people to help us get other tasks done while we get this core part done. Like, what does that look like if we're numbing out all of these and saying, nope, not that, nope, not that way, nope, not this? It's a lot of resistance that we're putting up. Not a lot, but a good amount of resistance that we're putting up. The final card that we got is Six of Wands. Let's see. Yes, so this is again about a mind that is tending towards getting bored and destructive, or towards approval seeking, kind of oscillating between those two. So that, whole mindset again, where this is what's happening possibly here. And so in response to that, or as a result of that, we can then choose to cultivate a collaborative and creative mindset where we're willing to look at what we can do with other people or other organizations that already exist. What can we do to make something out of what we have right now available? What can we do to, like, how can we ask other people what they can do with us, what we can do with them, for them, alongside them, And it's about healthy relationship building, and it's about the responsible and healthy decision making. So moral courage, integrity, and compassion, as well as practicing the skills known and shown to support healthy relationships. So turning connections into relationships. And that means consistently following up, which is hard for me to, like, as a disabled person, like, even though I work and what I do, like, that's what it disables me from, is that socializing is incredibly difficult. I literally lose track of time. Like, I talk to my best friend all the time that I'm like, I just accepted that my mind does not conform to earthly time. It's just not something that my brain is really capable of doing. Is that, like, it feels, one whole day feels like several days to me. And I've just accepted that, and that, like, if somebody tells me something happened a day ago, I'll have to go check the messages, and, like, I have to keep, track records of everything, like, dates and messages and stuff, in order to be able to know when exactly things happen. But I do have a really good memory also. Like, it's kind of like this thing, but, like, it's just like knowing what time things are, or when how long ago it happened or something, is that can be kind of difficult to me. So that 6 of Wands. Let's see what else they have to say. Value choices, moral, ethical crossroads. Yeah, tough value choices. Let's see what that's about. Seven, six. Public recognition, victory, progress, self-confidence, which that part I get. Oh yeah, public. Okay, so there's some people standing behind them. So, like, being recognized. So I think in the end of this, regardless, you're going to be recognized. And what do you want to be recognized for? Do you want to be recognized for your ability to tell other people what to do? Or do you want to be recognized for your ability to live in your values, to have your own principles, to be authentic and committed and devoted to those values and principles, and to wield power with and not over people? Which do you want to be remembered for? And do you want control, or do you want pleasure and joy? So whatever you're waiting for, whatever permission you're waiting for to take that action, you have it now. You have it now. I'm giving you that permission. What is the next step? What is it that we do next? Once we have that permission, once we have that assurance that we think we need, once we have the confidence we think we need, whatever it is that you think you need first, comment it down below if you think that will help. We can talk about it if you want to talk about it. Come join us on Planet Weird. I will have links for that stuff coming up soon. I think that there's still links in some of it. But you're going to become the king of your kingdom. You are going to pardon me. You're going to face obstacles, and you're going to need to be able to tap into your own inner wisdom so that you can make it through those things and make sense of it and make meaning out of it in a way that doesn't disconnect you from life or from other people. You can only do it with collaboration. You can only do it through being willing to change the way that you think, by being willing to change what you believe, by being willing to be challenged and to recognize that the being challenged may feel like a threat at times, but it isn't one. And sometimes when things feel like a threat, they're a challenge. And sometimes when a challenge comes, it is your egg cracking open, and you are going into a new life that is not worse or better than the one you came from, but is simply different. It is simply something else. And you can continue longing for the life you had in the womb or inside the egg. Or you can dig your heels in for what you have here now, which is this life where you have the ability to have relationships and to love and to be loved, and that you get to use your freedom to make other people more free, that you get to rock the boat and wreak havoc and stir shit up and dig your heels in for what you believe in, for what you actually feel like should and can be true. For me, that's ending rape culture. I dig my heels in every day that rape culture is not just the way that it is the way that we allow it to be. And it is when we step away from that justification, that rationalization, that it is what it is, that we don't owe anything to each other, all these rationalizations that we have, these thought terminating cliches that we use, once we move away from relying on those, that we open up a world. It's the same as when we step away from perfection. We make space for making progress, for being good enough, for looking for, and that's for us. Like those of us that want to start something, you want to do something, you want to feed your neighbors that are having a hard time. You don't have to wait for permission to take action. You can do that. You have somebody in your orbit that is really struggling or suffering. You can become something more, that what's needed there. I hope that this resonates with somebody, and if it resonated with you, I'd love it if you would comment or subscribe, or both. And I hope you'll see me back here soon. I'll have more messages out before long. This is the end of May in 2026. We've got, I have no clue what's going on astrologically. I've been kind of keeping up with it, like listening to things, but I have not been fully present with some of it. So, here we are. Time for me to go make a snack. Y'all have a good one.